Hi everyone, Paul here from familywheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And anytime that I can bring an Audi to the table for you with the letters RS in the title, I'm a happy camper. And that's because this is Audi's performance division, where they let their hair down a little bit, let go of some of those German sensibilities, and kind of go a little bit bonkers. Now, we've had a chance to review a couple of RS vehicles with you over the last year here on Family Wheels, and they are incredible drivers' cars. But there is one small problem, and that's that they are, for most of us, prohibitively expensive. Take that RS7 that I was driving around in a few months ago at a price as tested of $175,000 Canadian. It's great for most of us to dream about being in a car like that, but it's probably never gonna happen. Well, here for 2018, we have a bit of an anecdote, and it's the Audi RS3, a car that's been available in the European market for a few years now as a hatchback, but it's jumped the pond and is now available to us here in North America as a sedan. And hands down, this is the cheapest RS vehicle that we've ever had offered to us here in North America. At a starting price of $62,000 Canadian, all of a sudden there's a whole new contingent of RS buyers coming to the table. But don't think for 1 second here that just because this is a slightly more attainable RS vehicle that it's any less nuts. This tiny sedan has 400 horsepower packed under its little hood. It's the same power plant that we see in the Audi TT RS, which is a sports coupe from the company, but in this version, we've got 4 doors, seating for 5, Audi's amazing all-wheel drive system. I think I might be in love, and I haven't even really driven it yet. So let's get on board the RS3 this week, courtesy of the folks from Glenmore Audi, and see how it all stacks up right here on Family Wheels. Well, you don't buy a car like the RS3 for its clever cup holders. So let's get right down to the numbers here. 400 horsepower out of this little pocket rocket, 354 foot-pounds of torque, and officially a 0 to 60 mile an hour time of 3.9 seconds. And it's all thanks to perhaps the most unusual, kind of charming standout in this car, its 5-cylinder engine. The RS3 is sandwiched between competitors like the Mercedes CLA 45 and the cheaper but still pretty nuts Subaru WRX STI with their 4 cylinders, and then there's the BMW M2 with its 6. And it's as if Audi kind of went all Goldilocks on us here and said, no, you know what? 5 cylinders seems just right. What's interesting is that it's actually exactly half of the engine from another performance Audi, the V10 R8. It's like that engine has been cut right down the middle and has had one honking turbo slapped onto it. Now, this 5-cylinder isn't the most efficient choice. It's not the most refined choice, certainly not the quietest choice. By definition, it's off balance because it has an odd number of cylinders, but this engine harkens back to Audi's rally heritage. It's raw, it's fun, and the noise is so unique and special. So much of what a car like this is all about is the backstory, the heritage, the theater of it all, and the RS3 delivers that in spades. And while the use of 5 cylinders isn't new, Audi has had these engines in a number of their cars over the recent years, it has been overhauled for 2018. It now uses an aluminum block, which is lighter, it can handle a bit more abuse, it revs higher, and brings a different engine note to the table. So with all that said, if you're looking for a quiet car, even when this vehicle is put into comfort mode for cruising, well, the RS3 isn't it. We've averaged this week, even in comfort mode, 69 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour, which puts it on the noisier end. Then when you pop this thing into dynamic mode and shift the 7-speed dual clutch transmission into sport, well, all bets are off at that point, really. But the burbles out of this exhaust and the sheer back of the seat exhilaration will have a noisy cabin right at the bottom of the list of your concerns. But to tame this car's nuts factor just a little bit, yes, there is the drive mode select function. It lets you toggle between comfort and dynamic and custom modes and changes the shift patterns, the throttle response, which also makes this car surprisingly fuel efficient when you're not pinning it from light to light. And it also adjusts the ride as well, thanks to the mag ride suspension, which can soften or stiffen things up depending on the sort of driving that you're doing. But if you want the absolute most out of the RS3, then you can opt for the $1,750 Sport package. You get an increased top speed from 250 to 280 kilometers an hour, as well as Audi's RS fixed suspension. That means it's going to be more compliant through the corners, but it's also going to be stiffer, no longer adjustable either. So unless you're planning on taking this car to the track all the time, I'd do your organs a favor and stick with this regular system. In dynamic mode here in this regular RS3, it's still very responsive, but when you pop it over into comfort mode, yeah, for what this car is and what it's designed to do, it's actually pretty darn comfortable. I mean, it's no Audi A8 luxury saloon, but it's certainly far more livable than that Ford Focus RS that we were in this time last year. Brakes wise, we have some huge, totally new Brembo developed brakes up front. They soak up something like 85% of the braking demands for this car. And then out back, we have the same discs as you'd find in the lesser S3. And even without the carbon ceramics, which are a $5,800 option up here in Canada, this regular RS3 brings you to a satisfying halt. In fact, the smallest wheels that you can get for the RS3 are 19 inches just to accommodate these great big brakes. But speaking of the wheel setup, here is something very curious about the RS3. You can get it with a staggered tire size, actually putting a 20mm wider track tire up front than in the back. Now that might seem a little backwards compared to how supercars and muscle cars are often set up, but it's to help negate the understeer that we see in some Audis because of their all-wheel drive system. And yes, the RS3 has one of the best winter sleighing, back road charging, all-wheel drive systems out there, Audi Quattro. And like in the R8, it's adjustable. So in dynamic mode, for example, around 85% of power is going to the rear. Meanwhile, in comfort mode, it's more front-wheel drive biased. And of course, for moments when you want to bring out your inner rally car driver, the RS3 has 3 stages of traction control. It can be entirely enabled, partially disabled, or totally switched off, which is when you really get a sense, especially in the snow, for the extreme power in this car and just how much it likes to get flicked around. But speaking of flickable, I was a little bummed out when I got into the RS3 that we have an electric e-brake on board rather than the old school lever style. Even just from an aesthetics perspective, I think that would harken back to this car's rally roots just a little bit more. And while we're on the topic of analog, if you're wondering where the stick shift option is here in the RS3, well, you're out of luck. Audi says the dual clutch is going to shift way faster than us mere mortals and probably help save some expensive shop bills down the road as well. But there are paddle shifters mounted on the steering wheel and 2 separate shift modes, a more composed mode for daily driving and sport mode for higher revs and more aggressive shifts. Now, if you live up here in Canada, it seems like we're getting a bit of a plum deal with the RS3. Because if you make the currency conversion, the US models of this car are almost $9,000 more expensive, and they don't have as many features. Up in Canada, Napa leather, heated seats, a panorama sunroof, that magnetic ride suspension that I was talking about, smartphone connectivity, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, navigation, parking sensors, a rear backup camera, blind spot monitoring, LED headlights, Bang & Olufsen speakers, and Audi's top-tier, totally customizable virtual cockpit all come with the price of admission. But if you want additional smart safety tech like lane keep assist or adaptive cruise, you'll need to splurge for the $1,400 technology package. You can also get a sportier, throatier exhaust that will set you back $850, so will little touches like carbon fiber mirrors. However, one bit of kit that I really think should come as an option here on the RS3 that isn't available from the factory at all is a remote starter. Because this is a performance-oriented car, it takes a good long while to warm up. In fact, the digital rev counter here in front of the driver adjusts the red line to 5,500 RPM and warns you not to really gun it until this car's warmed up. And on chilly days like we have been having in Calgary here lately, that takes a good long while. So it really does seem like the perfect candidate for a remote start system. Also, check this out. These Recaro design sports seats are manually adjustable. Now you can get the power seat package, but at that point you're losing this higher grade Napa leather and this pretty epic diamond stitching in the seats as well. These seats, by the way, are just like in most performance-oriented cars, pretty firm for long-haul drives. So if you've got a bad back, make sure to take the RS3 for a good long test drive, just to make sure that these seats and the firmer suspension are all gonna work for you. My big issue with the RS3 seats, though, are that the headrests are not adjustable. They're all integrated in, which looks really cool, but it means that for a tall guy like me at 6'2", I'm actually well beyond where I'd like my headrest to sit, which affects both comfort and safety. Elsewhere here on the interior, fit and finish is generally really good, as we see in most Audis. I love the Alcantara in the doors and wrapped around the steering wheel. The carbon accents, they're subtle, they're not overdone, but they look really good. It's cool that the infotainment system can be stowed away when you want a cleaner dash just to focus on driving. But the air vents, once you start playing around with them, are surprisingly flimsy feeling, and I'd like a little bit more heft out of these paddle shifters as well. They just don't feel quite as meaty as they should in a performance car like this. Now, back in the boot end of things, while I'd love to see this car available as a hatch in Canada like it is in Europe, I would not hold your breath. The verdict from Audi is that there just wouldn't be enough of them sold, particularly in the US, to justify bringing them over the ocean. But this little sedan's trunk still has 315 liters of capacity. Now that is on the smaller side, but you can still squeeze our standardized trunk test in there. That's a stroller, a diaper bag, a couple bags of groceries, a backpack, and a soccer ball, but you're not getting much else. Meanwhile, the S4 sedan that we were driving in last fall, not surprisingly, 160 liters more space in the boot of that vehicle. So if you need a lot of trunk space for hockey bags or road trips, this probably isn't the car for you. But here's something that might surprise you. The S4 and the RS3 actually have very similar second row dimensions. Just half an inch more legroom in the S4. Now don't get me wrong here, it's still a pretty tight second row, especially if there are tall people up front. But it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And both front and rear-facing car seats fit. Our rear-facing car seat test result, well, 28.5 inches from the back of the front seat cushion up to the glove box. That's actually really decent for a small sedan, but it's headroom that's the limiting factor. It's true in the back seat too. I was grazing the roofliner back there when I was checking it out. And while there are 5 seat belts here in the RS3, that middle position is going to be a tough sell for anyone who happens to have legs. There's a big hump in the floor that's going to make it a tight squeeze for just about anyone. But it is nice to see a center pass through for a pair of skis or two, because this thing would be a supreme car to bomb out to the ski hill in with a couple of buddies. What I really like about the RS3 is that it's still totally nuts, like the similarly priced Ford Focus RS. But unlike that car or the WRX STI, it's understated. Unless people know their cars, the RS3, it's gonna fly under the radar a bit. And as I get a little bit older and I'm not as into flashy sneakers or great big wings off the back of my vehicles, the RS3 is really doing it for me. Glenmore Audi here in Calgary tells me that a lot of buyers who were all ready to slap down the cash for an S4 are saying, why not go just a little bit smaller and for roughly the same price, get a freaking RS car. Of course, the S4 is a bit roomier, but a big reason why folks go into the S and RS lines from Audi is because they love driving. And if that's the case, the RS3 for me is the clear, distilled winner of just pure, raw driving fun. And at a price, particularly up here in Canada, that gives you a lot of car for your dollar.